Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Tonight it's the debate for the Democratic primary in the 13th City Council District, a district that includes the Bronx neighborhoods of Throgs Neck, City Island, Pelham Parkway, Morris Park, Pelham Bay, Pelham Gardens, Schuylerville, Country Club, Locust Point, and Westchester Square, as parts of Allerton and Van Nest. Tonight's program is presented in partnership with the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization that advocates for informed and active participation in government and works to increase understanding of major public policy issues. The Democratic primary is on Tuesday, June 27th. The early voting period is from June 17th through June 25th. And there's a lot of other information you might want. For information, including deadlines for absentee ballots, visit vote.nyc. So now let's meet the candidates. There are 4 candidates running in this Democratic primary. A former Democratic female district leader in the 80th AD and member of the 49th Precinct Clergy Council, Irene Estrada. Nice to have you with us, Ms. Estrada. The first woman chair of Community Board 11 and president of the Van Nest Neighborhood Alliance, it is Bernadette Ferrara. Nice to see you, Ms. Ferrara.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And let's see, we have a Army veteran who is a former district leader. It is John Perez. Nice to see you, Mr. Perez. The incumbent is Marjorie Velazquez. She's the chair of the City Council's Consumer and Worker Protection Committee. Nice to have you with us, Ms. Velazquez. Candidates in tonight's debate, I will direct the question to one candidate. That candidate will have 60 seconds to respond. Then the opposing candidates will get 60 seconds to respond to the question. Candidates will receive 30 and 15-second verbal time warnings. And the moderator, that's me, reserves the right to ask follow-up questions and allow for rebuttals and dialogue. Please note that after the initial answers from each candidate, no statement can be longer than 30 seconds. And also note there will be no opening statements, but at the end of the program, each candidate will have 1 minute to offer a concluding comment. One other final note before we begin, the questions on tonight's programs include those submitted by the candidates themselves. So let's start with you, Ms. Ferrara. You switched your political affiliation from Republican to Democrat so that you could run in this primary, promising the public that you would be a different kind of Democrat. You said that your platform is very comparable to the Republican Party's platform. You supported Donald Trump in the last election. Why not just run as a Republican? 61% of the 13th council district are Democrats. Is that what they want in their council member?
Well, let me say first is, as far as being a Republican, the facts are incorrect what are out there because it was a very small amount of time, but I am a different kind of Democrat. I truly believe that a Democrat should, any kind of candidate should represent the concerns and the wishes of the community that represent, not a personal or political agenda. And I have to say, I am a real moderate. I have always been a moderate Democrat. My whole family have been. And I had stepped back for a while, but I saw what was going on in the Democratic Party, and I really felt the need to come back and be the voice of reason. And that is why I am a real moderate Democrat. And actually, very different from Marjorie Velazquez, who in 2017 actually was with the Working Party's family.
Okay. Anybody else want to respond to that before we move on?
I'll respond.
Okay, Mr. Perez.
I think that if you're a Republican and your ideology and your mentality is of a Republican, you should run as a Republican. The fact that she's running as a Democrat now is just because the numbers in the district. Democrats overweigh the Republicans in the district, and she just wants to have the best of both worlds. But it's not going to happen. People see right through that.
Thank you. Ms. Velazquez, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you're a Republican and an opportunist in this moment when there are real Democrats running like myself in this race who really does the
Ms.
job.
Estrada, anything else?
Yes.
It's up to you. You want to say something?
I believe that what happens is that we have over 174 voters that are registered in our District 13. we are blue dog democracy in the 13th Council. And what happens now is that everything's being challenged because of the agendas and politics. So I believe that people can change their affiliations if they like, but they have to pursue that particular affiliation until otherwise, because you know what it's going to happen? It's going to confuse the people with where do you stand and how do you vote.
30 seconds. Okay. Ms. Ferrara, you can have the final word since you were asked the question originally. Did you want to add anything to it?
I will say again, my whole life I have been a Democrat. My whole life, my whole family. And I just came back to the Democratic Party because there was a need for a voice of reason.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question is for you, Mr. Perez. You sent me this material. I was surprised to see it. You flipped the bird with your middle finger on both hands at a community meeting. You claimed that Ms. Ferrara and the district manager called the police on you. Now you say you're going to pursue legal action for them violating your First Amendment right to free expression. You pointed out that Ms. Ferrara gave 2 thumbs down at a public meeting on the Just Home project and criticized someone for using a negative tone. I have to tell you, I think for voters, none of that is of interest to them. What is interesting to me, and I think to voters, is the level of discourse that was displayed at the public meeting on the Just Home project that turned vile and angry with people threatening each other, and rather than solving any issues, showed off exactly the wrong way for a community to discuss a controversial subject. So the question for you, is there a way to debate these kinds of proposals without it resulting in personal attacks and threats so that the dialogue can be informative, passionate when necessary, but certainly more civil? Goodness, it's the Bronx. Can't we get along?
Absolutely. I mean, my position in there was to highlight the wrong and how it applied to me. It didn't apply to them. It applied to me. I just don't understand how it takes 45 minutes for a police to respond to a 911 call, but she got them there in 3 minutes. That's questionable. However, every situation, when you have an issue in community, when you have issues with war or diplomacy, the conversation starts at a table. When they don't disagree, when they don't agree on something, we go to war. And how it ends is right back at the table where it started. So we do have to use diplomacy. We have to exercise that strongly.
Although you flipped the bird, so you didn't quite, that's not the most diplomatic way of dealing with it.
It isn't, but it was my expression. I was very quiet. I didn't make any boisterous. I wasn't loud. I made a gesture, the same gesture that she made.
Ms. Ferrara, since you were named in this, you want to say something?
I will give you a play-by-play. Anytime we start, we have a code of conduct that is on our agenda, and it has.
You say ours meaning the community board?
The community board, yes, and it's a new code of conduct, and it's told by the sergeant of arms, and anything with the code of conduct, it needs to you need to let that person or persons know you have violated the code of conduct. That's exactly what happened. And as far as having the police outside, previous times we would always have 1 or 2 at the meetings, but we no longer.
Let's let her finish, if you would.
I have the floor.
Here we go again.
And I will just say, I had a feeling that something was going to happen, and I had the police there.
But why not call the police on the people who were threatening? There was a guy taking video, and he got there's clear video.
Are you talking about the
Just Home? The Just
Home.
Home.
That's different. A community board is in a different location.
Okay, that's fine.
So,
but my question really was about the Just Home project and why that got to be so vile. I thought it was the most un-Bronx thing I've ever seen.
Yes, and I totally agree. And to be quite honest, that should never have happened. That particular public hearing should not have happened because the voices of the people were heard the first time, and it was not going to change.
Let's let others. Ms. Velazquez, do you want to weigh in on that?
Unfortunately, it was very embarrassing to see, and it really made the community look terrible, especially Community Board 11. And when we're talking about what kinds of changes a democracy needs, it's decorum, it's civility. It's showing that you can actually have tough conversations while respecting others. And it was very unbecoming
as I recall, you didn't attend that because you
No,
were concerned for your own safety.
Correct.
That's different. Mrs. Estrada, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yes. I am the president of Mothers Against 1900. The women who come against the idea of putting formerly incarcerated individuals across the street from 5 schools. When we had the first town hall meeting, we had over 1,100 people that came to event, and of course they're going to be angry. Community board never came and notified no one to let them know that this was going to happen. So I took it upon myself to go out there knocking on doors and pass out flyers and inform them that this was going to happen. So by the time we had our next meeting at the Rotunda, some people had not been notified that this was going to happen. This is their community. Their great-great-grandparents have given them these homes and this community, and they work hard for their whatever they have. They felt violated. They felt ignored by our city councilwoman. They felt ignored by Community Board 11 and organizations. And as president of Mothers Against 1900, I believe they express themselves, especially, we live in America. They can express the way that they want to express themselves. And it makes me very upset and angry that people can feel obligated to say that they had done something wrong in the way that they acted, but no.
Ms. Velazquez, you were called out there. Do you want to say?
I'd like to say something when I can.
Well, I was asked first. So when it comes down to it, my team was there, present, but we have been present in this conversation. We have been meeting with community leaders on a monthly basis to not only discuss the concerns of the area and the project itself, but the vision that they have for this site if it's not just home.
Ms. Ferrara?
I'm going to state a point of misinformation that is going around because I was a part of when the community got told about this. It was on June 8th, and I was not there only because I was chairing a meeting. But that was the first time the community board was there to actually know what was going on with Just Homes 1900 Summerall.
You get 30 seconds you to finish up the dialogue on this question.
Right. I think the approach was totally, it could have been done better. The community board has to do better. You have to have community engagement. The council member has to do better in informing the public on what's happening and to find out what is in the best interest of the community, not for themselves.
Thank you. Ms. Velazquez, let's stay on the development question. I'm assuming you know this question is coming. You were well aware that many in the community are upset that you had said you opposed the Bruckner rezoning, and then at the 11th hour you changed your mind. Supposedly you were interviewed on our program. Why don't we just review that, explain your switch from opposition to support for the Bruckner rezoning?
Thank you, Gary, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come to your show and explain it because people hadn't heard it. So when we're talking about the rezoning, the initial plans as proposed to what was actually the final result was different, and that's what the community had asked for. They had asked for housing options, and so we got them affordable housing purchasing options, home ownership that hasn't happened there in a long time. When we're talking about our seniors, we have 100 units, a separate building dedicated to our seniors with wraparound services. We have 25 units dedicated to veterans, along with many community benefits that we had discussed on your show, including transit options, schools, and those
these
things.
items were not in the mix before the 11th hour.
Correct.
So in other words, it was part of a negotiated deal.
Yep, it was addressing the community concerns. We had meetings up until the final week leading to the vote with the community.
I'm sure others want to weigh in. This has been Ms. Ferrara. I'm sure you have something to say about it.
With regards to the Bruckner upzoning and any of the upzoning proposals that are attacking our communities in Community Board 10, Community Board 11, in District 13, we are under attack. And I will say that the Bruckner upzoning, which is going to change the fabric of a community that generations have basically said that, you know, we have the right to live in an area that does not have 300 to 400 apartment buildings. And that is the most important thing to remember. And you know, this is something I am 100% against it, 100%. Well, and the things that were there at the last minute, that, I'm
15
sorry,
seconds.
they're not going to be able to be there. The veterans housing, the senior housing, this is all making it look okay to say yes, but it's not something that the community wants, and I stand with it.
Let me follow up with a question. Does every community have the responsibility to build affordable housing or work with the mayor and, of course, with the city council
Yes.
to develop housing for people who really need it? Of course, there's a major crisis in our city. So where in the 13th Council District would you recommend it other than this particular project?
That's a very hard question to answer because you would have to look at the land use issues, and you really
But
would.
wouldn't the next council member have to answer that question?
Of course. And that person would actually, when it's me, will actually be taking a different way of handling it.
And what would that way be?
First of all, I know what the community wants. I know what their concerns are because they're my concerns. And I will be working hand in hand.
I'll let others weigh in. Did you want to weigh in? If not, Ms. Velazquez, you wanted to follow? Go ahead.
No, I can definitely chime in on this. I wouldn't have agreed to the amount of floors for that building. What it's in, it's 8 floors, I believe it's 8 floors. I wouldn't have suggested, I wouldn't have agreed to something like that. If I was forced to do something like that, I would have negotiated for other things. The wraparound services is okay. I don't know, Jericho Project pulled out of the veteran segment of it because they didn't believe on what was going on there.
30
But I would have negotiated for improvement of our parks. I would have done a brand new firehouse. I would have asked for a new precinct, 5 new officers, maybe 2 police cars, 5 miles of extra road paved a year. I would have negotiated
50.
for things instead of just handing the keys over.
Ms. Estrada and then Ms. Velazquez, you can get the final word there.
The upzoning has brought a lot of crisis to our district because of the reason that overdevelopers have more rights than the low-density homeowners. The homeowners feel violated because now you're going to be able to build a 5-story building with 100 units in the middle of the block, and that's going to change the quality of life. Where are the children going to go to school and where are they going to park? A lot of the plans that City Council has with the upzoning has never come to the conclusion of what is the consequence. Where are the people going to go? I know about the jobs, but where are they going to park? My concern about the upzoning is that when it all came to pass, when I ran against Ms. Velazquez a year and a half ago, during your show, again, I said that if you voted for her, you were going to get the upzoning, and you got the upzoning. Yes, maybe it could be their plans and their
15
vision,
seconds.
but it was never discussed with the community to see what the community wants, and that's where it fails. It fails in safety net of public safety, cleaner streets, quality of life is going to be affected, and it's very expensive.
Ms. Velazquez, you get the final word on this.
Look, at the end of the day, I can sleep at night knowing that I gave senior housing, knowing that I gave veteran housings, and more importantly, that I gave good union jobs to our families. So when they see what they built, which is 1 3-story building, 2 5-story buildings, and 1 8-story building, which in no definition is it a high-rise,
15
especially in a commercial corridor of a district, I'm okay with that because at the end of the day, my families have a place to stay. I get calls every day for housing, and guess what? We're delivering.
Thank you. Next question for you, Ms. Estrada. Let's continue on how we're going to build housing and deal with the homeless crisis. If you're elected to the City Council, how would you address the growing homeless crisis that has nearly 70,000 people living in homeless shelters? 10% of the children in public schools come from homeless shelters. And along with that, of course, right now we have a huge influx of migrants in the city of New York. The mayor seems overwhelmed. How should we deal with it? And if you are in the City Council, what would you recommend?
I would recommend that every single apartment in the district be rented. When you knock on the doors at NYCHA and when you knock on the doors on many of the buildings, regardless of which buildings are in our district, we have a lot of vacancies. A lot of these apartments are vacant. Go door knocking, and the thing is that they're not being occupied. So why are they not being occupied? And why are they not being renovated? And if you have people in the shelters, those children and those families would go first, and the veterans and the seniors before the migrants. Because as I work with the mayor very closely when it comes to the migrants and dealing with them and housing them in the churches, finding locations for them. But there has to be a big question mark. For me to be city councilwoman, It's the people in my district that are going to be
15
affected by all the decisions that we make in city council. My people in my constituents in my district will always come first in everything that I do.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to talk about homelessness? Ms. Ferrara first, then you, Mr. Perez. Go ahead.
There is no one size fits all when it comes to the homelessness. There is none. Those that have substance abuse, those that have mental health issues, they need to have what they need. They need to have the care and in a medical facility to really work with that before they get put in any kind of shelters, etc. And as far as I'm concerned, Ms. Velazquez, Marjorie Velazquez basically has voted yes on a new bill that gives the right for the homeless to set up tent anywhere they want. So that's where in our parklands and in our playgrounds, and that to me is just neglect, because that is going to take away our quality of life. There's going to be issues. How could you vote for something like that and actually say that you care for the concerns of your community?
Thank you, Mr. Perez. And I'm assuming, Ms. Velazquez, you want to respond as well.
Seems like every year the number of homelessness increases, the number of drug use increases, the number of mental health increases, and we're just trying to play catch up. As a city council member, I would completely focus my attention on the prevention of that. To prevent that from happening is education, is supportive programs for youth, so that they don't fall into that vicious cycle. If there's mental health that's needed for their parents, I know that there's a lot of single mothers, a lot of single parents out in our district, and throughout the whole entire district, it's very burdensome, it's very complicated. Addressing those issues and trying to prevent this from happening and continuously happening, we should be downsizing the number of people because we already know the answers. We already know what to do. We just have to implement it and take care of it.
Ms. Velazquez?
When we're talking about homelessness, it is a huge crisis, even before the migrants came in. And now what we're really doing on the city council is addressing both. It is making sure that we are developing permanent housing. And that is the number one concern. And when you do permanent housing, you're also bringing in jobs, which is addressing the other concern. A lot of folks that are in homeless shelters are actually working poor, right? They have jobs, but it's not enough. And that's what we're doing. We're bringing real jobs home. We're trying to make sure that at the end of the day, we're protecting these union jobs that have given our families so many benefits and have started us on the path to the American dream.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the next question, and that would be for you, Ms. Ferrara. Let's just talk about crime. There are many angles to this, so I'm going to start in an open-ended way. How can we do better in fighting crime in the 13th Council District in the Bronx and, of course, throughout the city of New York?
Well, first of all, as far as crime goes, our city is out of control. It is rampant. I don't care what the stats are. I oppose cashless bail.
Well, the stats aren't important? That if
the stats are important. But you know what? When you're hearing from the constituents, when you're hearing from people, when you're hearing from the elderly, when you're hearing from somebody who's gotten robbed, somebody who's gotten raped, etc., and it's not getting less, it's getting more. So you got to look at both sides of the coin.
30
and
seconds.
you know, I believe in funding the police. I believe that if the police need more training to deal with issues, with mental health issues, I think that's a plus. I think that's important. As far as gun violence, taking the guns from the average citizen to protect themselves is not going to deal with the guns that the criminals don't have any laws. So they're going to get their guns. So, I mean, there's just a different way of looking at it. I just feel that there's a lot of things that need to be improved on and changed.
I feel compelled to ask a follow-up about this. On your Facebook page, on Wednesday, actually, just yesterday,
Yes.
A grand jury voted to indict Daniel Perry, who was arrested last month, as everybody knows, for choking Jordan Neely to death on the subway rather than detaining him and waiting for the police to handle it. You posted there aren't enough good guys around with the testosterone necessary to help people who are threatened with physical harm. Penny's selfless act of heroism, there will be fewer and fewer good guys around when you need them most. I mean, this certainly suggests a support for vigilantism. If you got a strong guy around, let him take down somebody that people think is doing wrong. And let's face it, he took him down. He didn't detain him. He choked him to death.
Right, right. Well, I could, first of all, you know, it was a submissive hold, okay? And as somebody who has training, any kind of Army training, the situations are, you know, play by play, moment by moment. And I'm sure his goal was not to take a life. I'm sure that. I'm sure he probably saw this person and the other children, etc., to say, you know what, I got to do something. I got to step up to the plate. And I myself, I have to say, as I was going to school at FIT, I was sexually assaulted at one of the train stations. Okay.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And I screamed and yelled. I got cornered in the turnstiles. And when I screamed enough, as I do as an Italian, that person ran down there. I would have liked to have somebody there protecting me when I had no one.
Let's go around. Everybody wants to talk about crime. Anybody?
Yeah,
Mr.
definitely.
Perez, go ahead.
And I would definitely go back and answer that last portion of that question on there.
I think it's an important thing because it's out there and people are talking about it. We may as well have it out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
definitely true. We are trained in certain ways, in certain areas, but you are absolutely correct. The hold that she just spoke about, I have no idea what she's talking about. I don't think she knows. I know what it is. Exactly. And I taught these classes. I've taught self-defense. I've taught combat positions of threat. You have to assess the threat before you determine what type of force to use. If he had them already subdued, that was enough. He didn't have to continue to press on his neck to cut off the airway. There were two other individuals there that could have assisted to restrain that individual. Now, I'm not going to say that he's totally innocent or guilty. That's up to a court to decide. However, we have to understand the mindset of both of them at the time that happened. But Mr. Neely was not attacking anybody. He was making possibly a threatening gesture, but he didn't attack anybody.
We'll let the courts, of course, decide that. Anybody else? Ms. Velazquez?
Well, going back to your point about public safety, my investments have been directly into NYPD since the very beginning of me even serving on a community board 10. We advocated for fully funding Rodman's Neck. And just to let the viewers know, we have worked with the administration and having $225 million for Rodman's Neck. And that is assuring not only that the shooting range is covered, and we're finally addressing that noise issue for the community, but we're also giving our officers their own training facility and remodeling that for them, and even their bathrooms, because for folks that have been there, like myself, they're still stuck in the 60s, and we need to give our officers everything possible, every resource possible, so that they can do their jobs right. And that was my investment there, getting more than 24 officers for the 45th, as well as additional patrol cars for the 49th, and that's where I've been in this district.
Thank you, Ms. Estrada. Crime?
As the next city council woman, I would be addressing the criminal activity under the NYPD and the work with community. Our regards to all the crime that we're having in the gun violence and school safety that is out of control, it all comes from the laws that are being led by the state and senators. The Bell reform, you have the Clean Slate New York, and it continues to show that criminals have more rights than New Yorkers, hardworking New Yorkers. So because of the mental illness that we're dealing with, there's so much mental illness after COVID that this is going to continue to happen. I recommend that people do not take things into their own hands, because you do need to wait and call on the police. But there might come instances where people are going to take things in their own hands only because there's no public safety. Our city councilwoman has said that she stands for public safety, but in the last 2 years that she has been the city councilwoman, we're no safer. We're not a cleaner district. And my concern at the end of the day is without public safety, people cannot go and enjoy New York and work.
Ms. Velazquez, you want to respond, and then Ms. Ferrara will get the final word. Go ahead.
Sure. I literally just laid out how much investment I have had into NYPD, especially now also with their pension coming up. We have had discussions and making sure that we are treating our officers equal to other service members. That is a priority. But more importantly, I agree. Public safety is more than just our officers. It is
15.
sanitation. It is adding to the quality of life, which I have done record investment as well.
Got it. Ms. Ferrara, you get the final word here.
I think at this point, Marjorie Velazquez has failed our neighborhoods in many different ways. And maybe just now, because there's a question about being a progressive or a moderate, I feel that there are many ways that previously she could have been more proactive. And I feel at this point that we need to have more focus on public safety. If people do not feel safe, then we have failed them.
Thank you very much. Next question for you, Mr. Perez. Let's change gears a little bit, although maybe not that far. Let's talk about cannabis. Illegal cannabis shops have opened all over the Bronx, competing with efforts to open legal dispensaries. Neither the city's sheriff department nor the NYPD seems to have the resources nor the legal backing to get them shut. There was one that was shut on 231st in Broadway, and then 2 days later they were back open. So how do you close these down? And then, of course, pertaining to the 13th, what's your thought about the legal dispensary that's scheduled to open at some point on Williamsbridge Road?
Illegal dispensaries are a problem in our Newsom, but it was also foreseen. You could see this happening. And the city council passing legislation to decriminalize that or allow it should have had a risk
It came from
assessment.
the state.
It came from the state, but the city council should have had a risk assessment aligned with it to find out or to understand that if this is a problem in our neighborhood, if they're opening these shops illegally, what are we going to do? How do we deal with them? Do we have the manpower to deal with it? Right now, we don't have the manpower because they were allowed to come up. They were allowed. So if you would have addressed it earlier on, you probably would have been able to handle it a lot better.
Thank you very much. Others on cannabis? Ms. Estrada, we'll go right down the row. I'm sure everybody wants to comment.
This is another pattern and cycle of government making decisions without knowing the consequences. We know that the governor has given so much money towards these opening of these stores, but the problem is it hasn't been regulated. And one thing that we found out, we were going to have one here in our district in Community Board 11, 2460 Williamsbridge Road. We found out the same very day that they were going to vote on it. The people in the community need to have more time from the board to vote on these issues and to have their voices be heard, especially the parents. We don't want it across the street from playgrounds and right across the street from schools. So if being in the city council, you might need to work with the state and other local elected officials. But you also have to understand, for the safety net of the future of our children, this should not be anywhere near a school or near a playground. So that's
Is the Williamsbridge Road facility near
yes,
that?
it's right across the street from the school and the playground. And that's the same location where we fought for the methadone clinic, 2500 Williamsbridge Road.
Right. Ms. Ferrara?
Oh, I'm chomping at the bit at this one.
I think you've been chomping at the bit at all of them. So
Anyway, this could have easily been resolved from the get-go, and it just leads me to believe that there's other agendas going on because of how it played out. How could you have a business with something as new to communities and business not have regulations on it? How do you let that happen? Number one.
What did you mean by not have regulations?
The regulations, their operational regulations are not in place for allow actually the cannabis businesses to go in place. Now, even in the community board and as far as with liquor licenses, you have a very basic thing. It's 500 feet from place of worship, schools, etc. Why couldn't the stipulations of that been easily put on this, because it's very similar, and then have some sort of safeguards and work from there? Why wasn't that the first place, so that the communities that they wanted to have their businesses could say, you know what, at least we can work and improve it? It was just thrown out there for everybody. And as far as knowing about a lot of the locations, we get them at, we find out close to the time that the public does.
Got it. Ms. Velazquez?
Thank you for that. So as you mentioned before, this is a state issue. Their state did actually vote on these laws, and the state is actively managing and enforcing these laws through the Office of Cannabis Management. I took the lead last year and had a hearing because I saw that there was an opportunity for these illegal shops to pop up. And it was working with the city council to address this and bring this to our state partners. And we have been working with our state partners, which is why there's now real severe penalties for these shops. And we need to be mindful that it's not just about illegal cannabis selling, it is also illegal tobacco selling that we are actually able to accomplish and shut these places down with. And I've been actively working with the Sheriff's Department and NYPD and OCM to shut these places down because there are illegal smoke shops, period, that our community shouldn't have, and I've been working with them to shut them down.
Is one of the biggest issues not sufficient legislation that allows them to close it down? As I mentioned, the one on 231st Street.
In the past it was, and so now with what they did with increasing the fines and now making it tax fraud, right? And making it through that.
So they found another way.
They found another way of shutting it down,
Mr.
yes.
Perez, you get the final word on this.
I think that you should take a lot more responsibility in when you're passing laws and you're introducing bills and you're supporting programs like this and where you're putting them. You're putting them in our neighborhoods where poverty is at that height. There is no way out of it. So obviously now we got to deal with, I believe it's next year, we got to deal with the decriminalization of prostitution. So that's just another thing that we're going to have to deal with next year, but we have to close the gate on this one before we can entertain anything else.
Thank you very much. Ms. Velazquez, you're next. Let's talk about climate change. City Island has been getting flooding. Water's creeping onto the streets every time it rains. The seas are rising. The situation is not going to get better. Do you see construction of seawalls or other barriers as a worthwhile investment as the effects of climate change increase? Are there other climate change initiatives you think the City Council should fund? Obviously, we know what happened to our air quality a couple of weeks ago. Something I don't think any of us want to go through again. So you get the first chance at
As a proud Democrat, I know climate change is real. I know it's not a fable, and we've seen it just last week, like you mentioned. But it is also working with the different partners we have in the federal and the state government, as well as in the City Council using our resources through land use. So we are actually having conversations with land use, not just on seawalls, right? I've done investment in the Oyster Reef and their work, but it's also seeing where else besides seawalls, where can we be creative in not only construction, but making sure that we're focusing on green development to make sure that our climate is protected.
Thank you very much. I know, Ms. Ferrara, you referred in a campaign video to green energy nonsense. You want to just address the whole that comment and then also the whole notion of climate change?
Well,
and how it affects
well,
the
like
13th?
I think they're kind of two different animals. But as far as a Green New Deal nonsense, I feel the directive of that for constituents to change everything over from electric stoves to from the gas stoves to the electric stoves are just. I do feel that is nonsense. I feel that is sort of a direct hit to have with another agenda. So that affects
what
business.
would that other agenda be?
Well, how much time do you have? Really?
The clock is ticking. We can't deny that.
My point is, I feel between the businesses and the people and the NYCHA houses and other to basically have that be a part of it is a waste of money. I feel it restricts a lot of businesses, and the small business are the ones we're supposed to support. So why would we put something like this when there's so many other ways for us to help our small businesses, and here we put something else so that they have an issue. I mean, let's take some taxes.
We don't have more time, but,
Sorry.
but did you want to finish your sentence? Or?
No, I'm fine.
All right. Others want to talk about
Yeah, I
climate
think
change?
that as a
Mr.
city
Perez?
council member, you have to balance and you have to juggle a lot of items, and this is just one of them. The Green New Deal is just another product of something that we have to focus on because it's coming our way. Whether you like it or not, it's coming, and you're going to have to deal with it. How you deal with it will determine the outcome. If we're going to constantly fight it, I mean, Mother Nature doesn't care. Mm-hmm. She's coming, and she's going to do whatever she wants to do. So how do we start investing in better ways to handle certain issues that may come up in City Island, like the seawall, The surveys have already
30
been
seconds.
done. How do we get the money? How do we get the funding to do it? Working with a lot of agencies is great. The Army Corps of Engineers, all you got to do is give them a call, and they'll be there. So I'm Puerto Rican, right? We like Italians, we talk with our hands.
All ethnicities talk with their hands.
That's right.
Absolutely. So we have to pay attention to these. To call something
15.
a nonsense, I don't think that any issue that is detrimental to our communities is a nonsense. I think that we have to look at it and handle it.
Ms. Estrada?
For me, as a woman of God, I see all these things on a different level. It's spiritual warfare that we're going through right now in our country, especially in our District 13. We are being attacked from all four corners. And one of the things with the climate change is that there's so much money to invest in it, but yet you don't have enough money to invest for our seniors to live in better housing, or our kids to go to better schools, or public safety, or health issues, or mental issues. So there has to be
30
a balance of the money of how much is spent on certain things that are new and the things that are we dealing with that is humanitarian when it comes to the lives of the people in our district. The incidents that are happening with the waterfronts, with damaging, damaging property with Hurricane Sandy. I worked with Hurricane Katrina through the American Red Cross. You see that there's a lot of destruction. But when it comes big. It doesn't come small. So we do have to, whatever we do have to face it together.
Ms. Velazquez, you get the final word on this.
It is a balancing act when we're talking about balancing a $101 billion budget for New York City. And I'm a proud member of the budget negotiating team. I'm a proud member of the finance committee. And what we do is prioritize what is important to our communities. And it is also being
15.
proactive. It's knowing that we have a role to play and working with our communities to fill that. And so I am proud to represent a waterfront community like ours. And at the same time, it's working with the community on how to address their priorities.
Thank you very much. Ms. Estrada, the next question for you. The Bronx, let's talk about Metro North. The Bronx is slated to get 4 new Metro North stations in Hunts Point, Parkchester, Van Ness, Morris Park, and Clark City. What benefits do you see for the local communities? And are there infrastructure needs as well, whether residential, commercial, or otherwise, that the next council session will have to plan for?
Well, we know with that particular planning, it's going to be very big. You have 20-story buildings, 20-story buildings being built, and it's going to affect Waters Place, Van Ness, Morris Park, Olds, Tremont, and Parkchester. And in building these buildings, it's going to bring a lot of revenue and a lot of working places for people in the community. But it also brings a disparity, because all those apartments are not going to be affordable for my community. This is the problem when you overbuild with developers, because they wind up winning and the people in their communities wind up losing. It's too close to home density homes, low density homes that have been there forever. And the demographics of our district is going to change completely. People from Brooklyn and Queens, they're all talking about coming to move to the Bronx because it's cheaper. When you go door knocking, you find out that there's a lot of new people that are moving into the Bronx, into our district, because it's safe and clean.
That's good news.
What are we doing here?
What's that?
What are we doing here then? Why are we arguing?
Okay, thank you. Others want to talk about Ms. Ferrara first, then Ms. Velazquez, and I guess you will afterwards. Ms. Ferrara, you're next.
Okay, thank you. I have been working since 2011 with the city planning as a community leader for feedback, for brainstorming. So since nobody can deny having the 2 stations, Parkchester Van Ness and the Morris Park train station, is going to be a benefit. It is going to have positive benefit in so many different ways, getting into Manhattan, 28 minutes, etc. There's no question about it. The one thing they first said from the get-go, city planning, they are not going to deal with parking. Well, they're going to have to revisit a lot of that because parking is an issue. The second thing is, up until there with the workshops, all of a sudden we never talked about surrounding areas. That got revealed in December. And when it was revealed on December 13th and 15th, it was like a Trojan horse basically came in. And forget about, the benefits and the wonderful stuff that's going to happen with the distance and the train stations. It was all about affordable housing. No mention of amenities. No, we're a food desert. We're an education desert.
Time.
And there's no mentions of it. And still, even the scope of the work basically says there's no mention of it. And all of a sudden now
Thank
we're
you.
6,000 apartments, 18 to 20,000 new residents. Where are they going to go to school? Where are they going to buy their food?
Mrs. Velazquez.
So I'm fortunate to serve with the Bronx delegation with members like Amanda Farias, Council Member Kevin Riley, and Ralph Salamanca. And what we have done, because it impacts our districts, and honestly, our district, District 13, is impacted by 3 out of those 4. Even the Co-op City one greatly affects City Island. And so it is having conversations with community leaders. It is having conversations with the agencies. As we have seen, we have toured the sites together as a group, and we are engaging our communities. It is providing community centers. It is providing schools. It is increasing also the police precinct and the different firehouses there, and advocating and working with our state electeds and our federal electeds to make sure that the money's there as well. Because this is a massive
15
project
seconds.
that will let our families finally conquer this transit desert that we've had for so long and bring about so much more money into our communities, giving our small businesses more of a shot and making them get even more exposure. So I am proud to say
Time.
that we are working on making sure that this is a benefit for all, and I have been in contact with so many
you.
of our community for this
So
benefit.
your contention is that some of the concerns about not having other infrastructure are being attended to?
Correct.
That's what you...
Oh yeah, it is.
Mr. Perez.
As a co-founder of one of the largest organizations of revitalization in the South Bronx, Nos Quedamos, I can tell you firsthand how to break down a redevelopment or a new development, such as the railway, such as new housing. If you look at one aspect, railways is one thing, housing is another. The components that surround that are different agencies, and you have to sit down with them. Each one comes and brings a piece to the table. This is not the final draft, this is just a draft. Believe me, we
30
went through
seconds.
drafts after drafts after drafts. We figured out then where the schools were going to come, where the fire hydrants were going to be, where the sewer was going to go, where the school was going to be. South Bronx High School was one of the schools that we focused on because the population that was coming in, we were going to increase the school, and we have
15.
it. They have it there. We got a new precinct. So all of these are different components. You can't just look at something and say that's it. No, this takes a long-term planning, and this has been in the planning for over 20 years. This railway
Time.
didn't just start. It started on 161st Street because Pedro Cintrón said, why can I take
Thank you.
the railway to Manhattan?
Correct.
Ms. Estrada, you get the final word here.
I believe that with all the overdevelopment that we have right now, with the Metro North and all these planning for all these big buildings to be rising up on Allerton Avenue, we're dealing with a lot of crisis right now. And I believe that even though people can look at this as a metropolitan, it's going to be a new thing for our community where it can bless others. At the same time, those who have been living here for so long, traditional homes and traditional families, they see it on a different level. They see it like a violation of their peace of mind and their quality of life. So I believe that all this is going to be continue to push our good residents out of our district, because a lot of people are talking about moving instead of putting up with all the overdevelopment.
Did you want to add something real quick?
Of course. So quickly, the development around around the train stations. Most of it is in, just 80% is in Community Board 11, and out of all of those homes, we are going to have the 15% of each one of those buildings is going to be homeless. Most of that's
15.
going to be in Community Board 11, on top of all of the other shelters that are being built right now, all the things that are coming to fruition. So if anybody says anything that Community Board 11 does not have their fair share, now we were going to be put most of it, and this is unfair. This is unfair to our community.
Okay, we're running out of time, but go
I want to
ahead.
clear misinformation from fear-mongering Republicans on this stage right now. What I really want to emphasize here
How
is
dare you.
that we go back into our communities and let them know the truth, And the truth is, the Metro North stations
15.
are being discussed with all agencies, and the priority is making sure that the transit, the infrastructure for our communities are there, that we, as the Bronx, that we've been overburdened and really forgotten for so long, these are
Time.
issues addressed, and we've
Thank
been
you.
fighting for that.
We really don't have more
I just
time.
I need to rebuttal. I was
Go
called
ahead.
out. Okay, as far as being called a Republican, why don't you call yourself a working family, okay, party? Because that's basically what you did in 2017. You ran on the working party as far as the social and progressive agendas. And in 2021, you basically signed a pledge while in office that you were going to be you signed a pledge and
15
that you were going to be promoting the socialist agenda. So don't be calling me out. As far
I'm
as
not a socialist. Working families
but
was
that's what your
started
pledge signed.
with union backing and union members. So I'm a
Yeah,
proud.
you're bankrolled.
I'm a
But
proud
you did,
Democrat
you
who
did
does
leave
have
the progressive
I did leave the
caucus.
progressive caucus. I did.
Yeah, for a reason.
I do want to move on, Ms.
protect our NYPD and
Ms.
our law
Ferrara,
enforcement.
you get the next question. This will be our final question. LGBTQ people are under attack right now, nationally, locally. I mean, I don't want to articulate all the different problems they have. We'll give everybody just 1 minute to do it because we're almost out of time. And this will be for everybody, but you can start, Ms. Ferrara. Do you believe that LGBTQ couples should have the same rights as married straight couples? And obviously it's Pride Month, so we may as well conclude with that question. Ms. Ferrara, that's for you.
As far, I believe that everybody has a right to live the way they want to live. I really, truly believe that. As far as the civil unions, I felt that the civil unions that had been in place worked with the benefits and the questions, and that had been decided, and it seemed like it covered so many of the issues. So to actually change the marriage, I do believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, as far as a Christian. But I have no animosity, nothing at all. Most of my friends are part of the LGBTQ groups.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Ms. Velazquez, and then we'll get everybody, and then we'll do closing comments. Go ahead.
Last night, I was privileged enough to celebrate with our borough president, Vanessa Gibson, and her Pride event. Didn't see anyone there. And when we're talking about what it means, protections, it means fair is fair, equal is equal. There's no, just because I'm a friend, someone needs to have a different type of marriage. No, fair is fair, equal is equal. And I am a proud ally. I have been endorsed by Stonewall Dems because of my beliefs that at the end of the day,
15 seconds.
a marriage is between two consenting individuals.
Go ahead. Let's try to be brief because
Adults.
we're running out of time. We want to get
Absolutely.
everybody in. Go ahead.
10 years ago, I was proud to walk my daughter down the aisle to marry her lesbian. She's lesbian. I was very proud of doing that. I support it till this day. They have a child together, and I'm a great grandpa.
Congratulations for that. Ms. Estrada?
I believe that when you're working in government is equality for all. When it comes to my faith believes other, which is I believe that a man and a woman is in marriage. But I know that stepping into the ring as a city councilwoman, it's not about judging. It's not about looking at their gender and their decisions in their lives. It's about equal opportunity. It's about voicing their voice, letting their voices be heard, and making sure that they have equal representation.
Candidates, we've had a very nice dialogue here. We got everything out, I think. And Ms. Ferrara, you can take 1 minute and deliver your closing statement.
My name is Bernadette Ferrara, and I am a different kind of Democrat. I believe one that should be dealing and doing the wishes and the concerns of your community. And that is foundational. I know when I am elected, I do know that I will be working with the issues that concern me and concern the communities. I will not be saying one thing and then voting another. You have my word. If anybody knows who I
30
am,
seconds.
I am a loyal person, and I say exactly what it is. I do not believe in upzoning. I do not believe in I believe in democracy and diversity. I believe that democracy is allowing someone to live in a place that they want to live in.
15 seconds.
And diversity is having places to have choices, whether it's a high-rise or a bungalow. I will defend our community. I will do it to the utmost, that I know. And I
Thank
will
you.
not be saying one thing and doing another. The
Appreciate
things that
it.
are there, just vote for me, one and done.
Thank you. Mr. Perez.
I'm John Perez. I'm running to be your representative in the city council. I'm a combat veteran. I'm a single dad raising my daughter in this district, the district that we all share. My priorities are to provide a safe environment for her, and by doing that, I am ensuring that I provide a safe environment for all of you. I hope that you become encouraged to come
30
out
seconds.
and vote during this election. It is very important that you do not get discouraged from your civic duty. I want to thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Ms. Velazquez, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. I am Councilwoman Marjorie Velazquez. And since January of last year, I've had the pleasure to serve you all as your council member. And that has been protecting you by adding more funds into public safety. That has been protecting education, making sure that our schools are fully funded. It's making sure that you feel safe at night by making sure that our patrol cars are out in the streets. It's also knowing that our storefronts have the opportunity to stay vibrant because we're
30 seconds.
investing in legislation and funding for our small businesses. As the chair of Consumer Worker Protection, I've fought hard to make sure that all our community is safe. I'm not fighting for a vocal minority, I'm fighting for everyone. Making sure that at the end of the day,
15
our
seconds.
union jobs are protected, making sure that our seniors are protected, and that our kids have great schools to go to. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Estrada,
Which camera do I look at?
right here.
Good evening. My name is Irene Estrada. I am a senior citizen. I have two beautiful daughters that are in YPD and be serving in the police department. One is a sergeant and the other one is a detective. I back the blue. I do not defund the police. I am running for city council because we need not only a mental, physical, spiritual, and financial backing for all people that live in our district for the concerns of the interests of the people. We are in crisis, and we must select an individual
30
that can
seconds.
fight for us and do the work that has to be done to protect the low-density homes, to protect us from 1900 Seminole, to protect us from the regulations of all these
15.
cannabis locations, to protect us from the issues that we are dealing with. I recommend that you vote for Irene Estrada on June the 27th or early voting on June the 17th because it is the right thing to do to fight for
Time.
our communities together.
Thank you.
I thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Oh,
Listen,
thank you. Go
we're
ahead.
about out of time. John Perez, Irene Estrada, Bernadette Ferrara, Marjorie Velazquez, thank you. Folks, make sure you vote on June 27th. Thanks to the League of Women Voters. Thanks to everybody here. Good night.